In a fragile trade truce, a fresh conflict has erupted in the already fragile trade relationship between the world's two largest economies, the United States and China. Just weeks after both nations announced a surprise agreement to significantly roll back tariffs, tensions have escalated again, igniting a new wave of accusations and threats. Beijing has publicly accused Washington of seriously violating the terms of the recently signed trade truce. In response, China has vowed to take strong countermeasures. This diplomatic fallout began after President Trump alleged that China had, in his words, totally violated its side of the agreement. However, the president offered no specifics to support his claim. Behind the scenes, a senior U.S. official later clarified that the Chinese government had failed to follow through on a crucial element of the Geneva Accord, the removal of non-tariff barriers. This condition was considered one of the core agreements reached during high-level negotiations between both countries last month. During those talks, the U.S. agreed to reduce its tariffs on Chinese goods from an aggressive 145% to 30%, while China committed to lowering its tariffs from 125% to just 10%. In addition, both sides agreed to a 90-day pause in new tariff actions to allow space for further negotiation. Chinese officials also pledged to dismantle certain retaliatory measures they had put in place. The deal was hailed as a rare moment of cooperation, a step toward easing the economic conflict that had roiled global markets. However, China now claims that the U.S. has breached the pact by taking unilateral actions inconsistent with the spirit of the agreement. Chinese officials have pointed to several U.S. moves that they believe violate the truce: continued restrictions on access to critical semiconductor design software, a wave of travel bans targeting Chinese students, U.S. pressure on international allies to avoid using Huawei telecommunications technology. Beijing expressed particular outrage over U.S. policies toward Chinese students. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokespeople stated that the U.S. has unreasonably canceled visas under the pretext of ideological concerns and national security. They argue that these actions undermine cultural and academic exchanges and damage the legal rights of Chinese. Students.China further criticized the U.S. for what it called politically motivated discrimination. Officials warned that these actions not only contradict America's public commitment to openness and freedom, but also risk seriously harming the U.S.'s global image and credibility. Adding fuel to the fire, China's Ministry of Commerce said, "The U.S. measures have undermined the mutual understanding that was reached during a phone conversation between President Trump and President Xi Jinping earlier this year in January." While Washington insists that China is retreating from its obligations, Beijing maintains that it is merely defending its sovereignty and national interests. Nevertheless, amid the rising tension, hope remains for renewed diplomacy. Two senior White House officials have reportedly indicated that a phone call between President Trump and President Xi may take place in the near future. Such a conversation could be critical in determining whether the agreement can still be salvaged, or whether it is on the verge of complete collapse. In an interview with CBS News, Treasury Secretary Bent acknowledged that there are still unresolved elements within the deal. He said these could potentially be addressed once the two leaders resume direct communication, although he did not offer a timeline. Meanwhile, Kevin Hassett, director of the National Economic Council, emphasized that both nations remain open to further talks even as progress behind closed doors appears to have stalled. Beijing, however, is demanding concrete commitments and finalized documents at lower negotiation levels before it agrees to any leader-to-leader discussions. All of this unfolds against the backdrop of yet another major announcement by President Trump. At a campaign-style rally in Pennsylvania, the president declared that the United States will double tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, raising them to 50% starting Wednesday. He argued that the move is necessary to strengthen America's domestic steel industry and reduce reliance on Chinese manufacturing. In light of these developments, what was once viewed as a diplomatic breakthrough now appears dangerously close to unraveling. With new accusations flying and threats of retaliation looming, the fragile truce between the U.S. and China is no longer a symbol of progress, but a precarious ceasefire that could dissolve into full-scale economic confrontation.